Welcome to SysEng Quick. My name is John, and today I'll show you my process for building a custom dev container. Dev containers are a really useful tool for software development. Maybe you've used one in the past and noticed how easy it was to get started. No prep work at all. It's almost like you're using the dev's own laptop. But how do we get there? The basic idea sounds easy enough. Build a container, add dependencies and tools, and set up a dev container config. That's a little abstract. Let's do something more concrete. A common problem new hires are faced with is being asked to make a change to an existing piece of code. This code predates dev containers, and no one ever set one up for this project. There isn't a lot of documentation, and no one is exactly sure what you need to get started. I happen to have a project I'd like to work on in just such a state. It's a full stack web application with a React front end and a Python fast API backend. I wrote it a couple of years ago, and I'd like to make some changes. Let's see if we can add a dev container to get it up and running again. I've got the repo open in VS Code. Taking a look around, I see we have some Docker files and library dependencies for Python and Node.js. The Docker files should tell us what we need to run the code. In the backend Docker file, we start from the Python 3.7 image and use pip to install the requirements. In the front-end Docker file, we start from the Node 16 image, and we use npm to install our dependencies and build the front end. We use a multi-stage build here to run the front end with Nginx. We don't need to copy these files exactly, but we have some idea of our requirements. We want to make a dev container, so we're going to need a container that has those requirements. The existing Docker files use separate base images, one for Python and one for Node.js. Although we could set up Docker Compose with two services and use multiple dev containers, it can be difficult to switch between them. Leave a comment if you want to see that setup and some of the problems you could run into with it. Instead, I'm going to build a single container with both Python and Node.js. And I'll launch things from the CLI, just as I did 2 years ago without the dev container. Make sure you have the dev containers extension for VS Code installed and a rootless Docker setup. I'll leave a link in the description to another video I made on dev containers if you need help with that. Let's start by opening the command palette with Ctrl-Shift-P, or on a Mac, Command-Shift-P. We'll search for Add Dev Container Configuration Files. Select Add Configuration to the workspace, and choose Predefine Container Configuration. Now we come to our first choice. Which template should we use? If we were using a single language, I'd recommend picking one of the official templates for that language. But since we're using Python and Node.js, that won't quite work for us. That leaves us with a few options. We could pick a template based on one of the languages and add the other. We could pick a base Linux install, like Debian, Ubuntu, or Alpine, and install our languages manually. We could even use features to install our languages, since both Node.js and Python have those. The amount of choice can seem overwhelming at first. Now, I don't recommend using features. They're really cool, but it's not always clear how they do what they do, and it could change at any time. This means your dev container isn't exactly the static, stable environment you thought it was. For our purposes, I'm going to start from one of the Python containers and add Node.js. The reason I chose this is that it's the most similar to our existing setup, and it's much easier to install a specific Node.js version than a specific Python version. Node.js has Linux binaries, while Python doesn't. Let's search for Python and look for the Python 3 dev container. You can tell from this badge icon that it's an official dev container from Microsoft. Now, with Python 3.7 being end of life, there's no option for that here. There probably is a container, but let's try 3.8 Bullseye instead, since it's the most similar to our existing environment. We can always change our base image later if we find things don't work. I'm not going to select any features, so I'll hit OK. And now we have our dev container config created. We've been given the option to reopen in the container. Let's do that and see if we can run our backend. First, we'll check our Python version with Python 3-V, and you can see we do indeed have Python 3.8. In our Docker Compose file, it looks like we can run the backend with UVcorn, but that's not going to work. We don't have any of our Python dependencies. But this is the heart of the process. Think about what you need, figure out how to get that, try it out, and see if it works. Repeat until it does. Let's see what we can do to get our Python dependencies. The Docker file uses pip install. Will that work for us? Let's try it out. Python 3-m pip install-r requirements.txt. It appears to be working just fine. Can we run UVcorn now? Yeah, sure can. Can we get our app running if we run the command from Docker Compose? Let's try UVcorn movie manager :main or .main:\app. Looks like it's working. Let's click open in browser to see if we can get our docs page. It appears to be working just fine. So how do we add this to our dev container permanently? Let's go look at the dev container config VS Code created for us. It's pretty basic, just a name and an image. Let's change the name to match our project. I'll call it Movie Manager. The image we're going to need to build on top of that. Let's make a new Docker file in the .devcontainer folder. We need to build from that dev container image. So let's go ahead and copy this and say from this container. Now at this point, we don't have the workspace mounted, so we'll need to copy over the requirements.txt file somewhere and then use pip to install the requirements. Let's say workdir/app, workdir. Then we will copy backend/requirements.txt to /app, and we'll run Python 3-m pip install-r requirements.txt. Okay, that looks like it should be pretty good. Let's go change our devcontainer.json file to use our new Docker image. We'll comment out the image property and replace it with the build property. This is a dictionary with two keys that we need. The first is Docker file, which is just our Docker file. Second key is context. I'm going to supply the context of the parent directory. We need context to access the requirements.txt file. Docker can only access files within its context folder, which by default is the current folder, aka .devcontainer. Since requirements.txt is in the directory above that folder, we'll use the parent directory instead. Let's go ahead and save this, and let's go ahead and rebuild our container. Go ahead and close our application. I'll open up the command palette with Control-Shift-P, and I'll say rebuild container. We can open the log and see what it's doing. You can see it's running Python 3-m pip install. Things look good there. Let's open up a new command prompt. Do we have UVcorn? We do. If we go to the backend can we do UVcorn movie manager.main:\app? Yeah, it looks just fine. If I go in here and try to run one of these things, does it work? Yeah, it worked. We don't have any, but it did work. You can see it got actors, and we responded to it. That takes care of our back end, but we still need Node.js and NPM for the front end. The front end Docker file uses Node.js 16, which is end of life. We could probably still install it, but let's try the next version, 18 instead, and see if that works. On the Node.js download page, I've selected the options for Node 18 to be installed using NVM. Let's follow these directions to install Node.js. Let's copy over the curl command. We'll open a new terminal and paste that in there. NVM is actually already installed in this dev container. That's okay, it won't hurt to install it again. Now we can do nvm install 18 to install Node.js version 18. And let's see if our version works. If we do node-v, yep, that's version 18. npm-v, 10.5, exactly what's shown on the download page. Now that we have Node.js, let's try installing our packages. We'll go into the front end directory and run npm install. It'll probably take a minute to get all the packages, but it looks like everything is working. Okay, there's a few vulnerabilities, but that's to be expected given our project is 2 years old. We should fix that, but that's a different topic. Let's see if we can run the front end. We'll do npm start. Everything appears to be working okay. Can we go to the movie manager front end? Everything's blank, but it appears to be working. If we go to the admin section and add an actor, say Chris Pratt, does it let us do that? Yes, it does. Okay, everything appears to be working just fine. So why don't we try moving those commands into our Docker file? We'll go over here. Let's go back to Node.js. Let's copy this curl command again, and we'll do run the curl command. And then we can run nvm install 18. There we go. We need to copy the front end package star files over to our app folder, and we can run npm install. So, will we get the same results if we rebuild our container? Let's find out. I'll open up the command palette and we'll rebuild the container. And you can see we got an error. Looks like there's a problem with running nvm install 18. The problem is nvm is not a command. It's a bash function that you get from nvm. We need to fix that in our dev container. Let's go ahead and select edit devcontainer.json locally. We'll go and select the Docker file for dev container. We'll close the log. I don't need it. And this command is not going to work. We need to get the bash function nvm before we can run this. One way we can do this is if we have bash, we can do bash-c, and then we'll do source user local share nvm nvm.sh, and we'll do $& nvm install 18. Now, assuming I've got this path correct, this one should work. Let's save that, and let's rebuild and reopen in the container from our command palette. If we open the container log, you can see npm install is running. That looks promising. Okay, our dev container appears to have started now. Let's open a new terminal. Let's go into our front end and run npm start again. And you can see that React script starts. And yeah, everything looks like it should be fine. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the backend running, so it doesn't actually work at the moment. But we can fix that if we open up a new terminal and go to the backend and do uvcorn movie manager :main or .main :app. There we go, everything's running again. Now we can hit refresh on this page and everything should work just fine. And it looks like it all does. And that's my process for building a custom dev container. I hope that it was helpful. If it has, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. It helps out the channel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.